Every member of the boys explained. We're gonna start with our first D-tier member, Grace Mallory. Although Grace isn't often seen as a prominent member of the boys, she was actually the founder of the group, and the lore that she possesses dates back to when Soldier Boy was the talk of the town. Grace was a former U.S. Army lieutenant who actually participated in Operation Charlie, which combined the use of the American Army forces and superhumans, which ultimately ended in complete failure. The loss the Americans suffered cost Grace 116 of her own men, with Vought gaining full immunity over the incident. As a result, Grace then developed a vendetta against Vought and swore to make them pay. Fast forward a few years, and Grace finds herself in the presence of a man named William Butcher. Grace sparks a desire within him for vengeance against the superheroes. Together, they co-founded the boys. Grace decided to hang up her boots after her grandchildren were burnt to death by lamplighter. This made her realize the severe consequences of her desire to take down the superheroes. This event made her abandon her path of vengeance. She ends up becoming the guardian and protector of Ryan Butcher, which doesn't really end too well for her. Moving on to our next member, Terror the dog. Terror is the loyal companion of Mr. Billy Butcher. He is an English bulldog that wears a really cool spiked collar and is just the goodest of boys. Butcher actually trained Terror to hump anything on command, as we see here, as Billy commands him to hump a Homelander toy. Unfortunately, we aren't as familiar with Terror in the show as we are in the comics, with co-creator Eric Kripke stating Terror's absences essentially boil down to the difficulty of working with dogs, which makes sense. Let me give you an example of what I think it would be like with Terror in a popular scene.
This is like that scene in The Matrix. Now, you could take the fucking red pill.
You see, it wouldn't work. Let's move to our C-tier member, Frenchie. I know what you're gonna say. And I can already see comments that I may get about my ranking placement, but this is my list. Not much is known about Frenchie's early life, but he claims to have had a rough upbringing, one example being a story he told involving his father trying to smother him with a Hello Kitty blanket when he was 10 years old. Frenchie would spend most of his time either getting high or breaking the law. He would also create weapons that he would use on supes if they tried to stop him during his heists. The law eventually caught up to him, and he was arrested during a bank heist. While Frenchie was in custody, he was approached by Grace Mallory, the woman we spoke about before, who was impressed by his abilities to make weapons that counter a soup's power, where soon after their meeting, he is made a member of the boys. Now, although Frenchie is a mastermind and oftentimes a force to be reckoned with, I do believe after his mishap in Season 4, almost costing him the life of Kimiko, he can be a bit of a liability. Coming up next on the list, we have Hughie. Hughie Campbell Jr., better known as Hughie, was just your average everyday American. He had a good job, supportive father, and loving girlfriend. Well, that throws a spanner in the works. After his girlfriend, Robin, is accidentally killed by A-Train, who was high on Compound V at the time, Hughie becomes hungry for revenge. He is then approached by Billy Butcher, who offers to help him get that revenge, incorporating Hughie into the boys and pretty much changing his life forever. Hughie was once a kind, compassionate, and intelligent young man, but during his time as a member of the boys, he became more stern and aggressive. He also begins a relationship with Starlight. At first it was to gain intel and was strictly business, but over time it flourished into something real and is now getting to the point where he wants to put a ring on her finger. Her finger, not the fake, freaky, butt stuff loving Starlight. There was a certain point in time where Hughie decided to turn his back on the boys and pursue a career alongside Victoria Newman. He still had the intention of taking down Vought, but without all the blood and guts, which is pretty rich coming from someone who detonated the butt bomb, if you ask me. He is also one of the members on this list that experimented with Temp V, which gave him the ability of teleportation, even if it does mean losing his clothes in the process. I'd say that's pretty cool. Moving on to our second B-tier member, Kimiko. Kimiko was born in Japan. In her youth, Kimiko grew up with her parents and brother Kenji. One night, a group of terrorists from the Shining Light Liberation Army broke into her home, killed her parents, and kidnapped both her and her brother, forcing them to serve in their army in the war-torn Philippines for many years. She eventually managed to escape, leading to her transportation into the United States, where she was experimented on with Compound V. Her experimentation was a part of an elaborate plot by Homelander to create supervillains and allow them to wreak havoc all over the world. This would force the US government to allow superheroes to join the army and combat these superhuman threats. When the boys first encounter Kimiko, she is found as a prisoner, locked away in a cell deep inside a secret hideout filled with gangsters. They initially think she is helpless, and Frenchie takes it upon himself to free her, which gets him front row seats to the showcase of her abilities. Her abilities include a regenerative healing factor very similar to the likes of Deadpool, where we even see her grow a little baby leg, very similar to Wade Wilson in Deadpool 2. She is also voluntarily mute. Kimiko is actually capable of vocalization, as seen at the end of Season 4. Her brother Kenji revealed that her muteness is the result of the psychological trauma inflicted on her when her parents were murdered in front of her. She did actually lose her abilities after fighting against Soldier Boy, but was given a second dose of Compound V from Starlight, which gave her access to her powers once again. Her spot among the boys was cemented after saving Frenchie from a bloodthirsty Black Noir. She was able to go toe-to-toe with the Master Assassin for a while, but was ultimately outmatched, which introduced Frenchie to the extent of her regenerative ability. Kimiko is a pretty cool character. I can't wait to hear what she has to say in Season 5. Moving on to our next member, Mother's Milk. Marvin T. Milk, better known as Mother's Milk, or MM, if you know him like that, possesses an advanced wisdom among the team. When the boys find themselves in a sticky situation, he bestows his wisdom upon them, either to inspire them or set them on a better path. After his grandfather was killed by Soldier Boy, and his father allegedly died of stress trying to seek justice, Marvin became determined to take down Vought and expose the crimes of all the superheroes in their company. At some point in his career, Marvin joined the United States Navy, where he became a skilled combat medic. He was well liked by his comrades for his natural leadership skills. But after an altercation with his racist commanding officer, which ended with Marvin knocking his CO out with one punch, Billy convinced Grace to let him join the boys in their war against the Supes. Mother's Milk's membership with the boys comes at a cost, as he now has a family he loves, and something like that can easily be used against him. He ends up distancing himself from the boys to focus on being a father to his daughter Janine, but this slowly fades when Butcher informs him of an opportunity to finally get his revenge on Soldier Boy. It is then revealed that Butcher's master plan was to actually work alongside Soldier Boy, pushing Mr. Milk out of the equation for good. Well, not for good. He does eventually come back and run the boys under his leadership. Marvin also suffers from a psychological disability called obsessive-compulsive disorder, which means he absolutely loves to clean. I also want to give a shout out to all the awesome shirts he wears. That alone makes him an A-tier member on this list. Now let's move to our second A-tier member, Annie January. Annie January, or Starlight if you want to go by her soup alias, was actually once a proud member of the Seven. I spoke about her in another video, which you should check out, link in the description. So I'll keep this short and sweet. Annie was once a bright and bubbly soup that wanted nothing more than to help people. She exceeds her own expectations and earns a spot in the Seven, thinking she has made it to the big leagues. She quickly finds out about Vaught's corruption and joins the boys alongside her boyfriend Hughie. With the passage of time, Annie leaves behind her bubbly personality and develops a hardened, more cynical personality, having been exposed to the dark side of the soup world. She has light absorption abilities, and as we see at the end of Season 4, she now has the ability to fly. Annie is pretty cool, and I'm sure she's going to kick some ass in Season 5. And finally, to conclude our list, Billy Butcher. William Butcher, better known as Billy Butcher, or simply just Butcher. He is the profound leader of the boys who was once a member of the British Special Forces. Due to his father's abusive behavior, both Butcher and his brother Lenny grew up to be dysfunctional individuals. As the older brother, Billy did his best to protect his younger brother from their abusive father. However, as time went on, Butcher started to develop some of his father's aggressive tendencies. Afraid of abusing his younger brother, Butcher eventually ran away from home to join the British Royal Marines and later the SAS. He eventually moved to America and met a woman named Rebecca Saunders, who he fell in love with and married. Butcher would accompany her to a Christmas party at Vought Tower, and at the party, Butcher would meet Homelander. A few days after the party, Becca met with Homelander in a private room where he did some bad stuff to her. After that, Becca became pregnant with Homelander's child. Vought agreed to help her under the condition that she would disappear and would be presumed dead. Billy believed that she unalived herself and would eventually become contacted by Grace Mallory, who would show him a video of his wife entering a room with Homelander and later leaving the room distressed, convincing Butcher to agree to join Grace's team to get revenge on Homelander and Vought. Butcher was always the most aggressive member in the group, and we finally see him give in to his violent ways as he now pursues the mass genocide of all living soups, all whilst being a soup himself. Thanks for watching. For every person who subscribes to the channel, I will do one push-up in the hopes that I will look like a Hemsworth brother.